Hello and welcome to the Inside Knowledge podcast for people with IBS. I'm Anna Mapson. This is episode 109. I want to talk to you a bit about nutrition trends that we should all watch out for coming up in 2026. We are nearly at the end of 2025 now. And there's a couple of things I want to draw your attention to, things that I've seen in social media, on various blogs and websites, and I think would be really helpful for you to keep a watch out for as you are trying to navigate all this huge amount of information that we've got access to nowadays, as well as the use of AI. Now, last time I said the next episode is going to be about nutrition, New Year's resolutions. I'm going to wait until after Christmas to do that and do it on the next one, which is more around New Year time, because I think it'll be more relevant. So we're going to focus on this for today. First one I want to talk to you about is a trend called fiber maxing. Now, this is kind of like a Gen Z thing where people like to max everything. I've heard my kids talk about sweat maxing in the summer when people in school were like trying to sweat too much. It can be applied to a whole range of things. Looks maxing is another thing, which maybe has some slightly dark undertones about men trying to increase the size of their jaw and trying to look more manly. So fiber maxing is just about eating more fiber. And on the surface, you might think, hey, isn't that what you're always trying to tell us? I definitely don't hate the fact that people are talking about fiber and eating more fiber and thinking about it. Like, this is really cool and definitely something I'm in favor of. However, the fiber maxing trend and what you will see a lot of on Instagram is mostly about increasing your fiber through powders like prebiotic fiber supplements. Now, this is a concern because it's not leading people to eat more fruit and vegetables. They're not eating more brown rice and whole grains and thinking about nuts and seeds and lentils. What they're doing is just adding loads of fiber powders to their normal day and carrying their kind of maybe quite low fiber diets. It's also been maybe commoditized in a little way, like gamified, I suppose, is what I meant. So people are trying to, hit certain targets and outdo each other, competitiveness. Like, maybe this isn't in your social media feeds, but it is definitely going on in corners of the internet. So whilst I love the idea of people focusing on fiber, and I think actually fiber is the new protein, I've been saying this for a few years, that fiber really is going to be the new hot word for 2026. And you might start to see it in everything, fiber water, fiber crisps, fiber sweets. Like, people are really catching on to the fact that this is a sellable, marketable tool. And it has its origins in really great places. It's because there's so much more known now about the gut bacteria and that we need fiber for so many health reasons. We need it for cardiovascular health, maintaining healthy weight, and of course, good digestion. So there's loads of reasons for increasing fiber, but my advice to you would be don't max out on fiber powders and really focus in on healthy foods that contain fiber, because what you're also getting when you're eating fruits, vegetables, whole grains is a whole load of vitamins, minerals, antioxidants that are made up in the food matrix. They're really helpful for our overall health. So when you have an apple, for example, you're also getting quercetin, which is a kind of antioxidant that's very good for your immune system, particularly if you have atopic conditions like eczema or asthma. When you're eating like lentils, you're also getting little bits of iron and other minerals that are really healthy for the rest of our body. So we can't just extract out the powder and only have a fiber supplement. Now, that said, if you did want to think about adding a fiber supplement to your routine, two that I often suggest to people would be partially hydrolyzed guar gum. Now, this might be sold as PHGG because that was quite a long term that I used, or Sun Fiber is like a brand name that you might see, especially in the States, but partially hydrolyzed guar gum is mostly in the UK. It's a low FODMAP prebiotic powder, which is helpful for growing the good bacteria, increasing stool volume, regulating bowel movements, but it's not fermentable. So it can be really helpful for people who struggle with high fiber diets. The other thing you've heard me talk a lot about is psyllium husk. This is good for people who have constipation and diarrhea because it binds, it gels, and it creates a normal standardized bowel movement. So really helpful if you are struggling either with loose stools or not enough stools that are too hard. So those two things would be the ones I would suggest, but I don't suggest taking them at like 10 or 20 grams. I'm just talking about like 5, maybe max, just to see how you get on. Don't fiber max, I think would be my big takeaway from this trend. Okay, the second trend that I see a lot that I want you to be careful about is gut scrubs or gut cleanses. Now, these have obviously been around for a while, but they are not going anywhere. So the products that I'm talking about, generally they include a kind of clay which is thought to soak up toxins, bad bacteria, parasites, whatever in your gut, and then excrete them. So this is a lovely thought, that you can just take something that almost goes through and sweeps up all the bad stuff, leaves you clean and squeaky on the inside. So that is obviously so tempting, the idea of that, when you're in a state where you're bloated, you have pains, everything you eat seems to set off another flare. Maybe you're constipated and you feel like everything's just stagnating in your body. That thought of having something come through and sweep in and clean you up from the inside out is very intoxicating kind of idea. Like, yes, we would love that. However, it doesn't necessarily work in the way that you think it will do. When we take something like these bentonite clays, or, sometimes they're called binders, what they're doing is they are moving through your body. And yes, they do absorb things from your gut, but some of it's stuff that you need. And they can even cause blockages if you're not drinking a high level of water alongside them, because they're kind of like clay, like they're thickening and solidifying. Now, the evidence that people will state on social media, and I've watched quite a few of these on Instagram, which are particularly gross, but people showing you what they pass and what comes out in the toilet as evidence that it is cleaning, it is taking something out of you. Now, this, sometimes it's called colloidal plaque or mucosal plaque. Basically, it is probably the clay mixed with food waste, mixed with your digestive juices, mixed with other stuff. It isn't evidence that you need to be cleaned more from the inside. Parasite cleanses are not effective at removing parasites from your body. If you have a parasite, something like Giardia, then you're going to need some medication from your doctor, and you're going to need to be checked out, because these do not go just with the use of parasite cleanses that you can buy online. So the thought of these cleanses is very appealing, especially the ones I think that are termed gut scrubs. You might imagine that you're going to be exfoliated from the inside out and all fresh. But the waste products that are coming out after taking these things, and often people encourage you to do them alongside like a juice cleanse. So you're taking these binders alongside only drinking soups or juices, which I don't suggest are a good way to reset your gut. So what else could you do instead? Well, we know that soluble fiber is a really good absorber of things. It removes a lot of waste products from our gut and helps to keep it clean naturally. So as I was just talking in the previous section about psyllium husk, this is a really good way to help remove these kind of things from your gut, to keep it flowing, keep it moving. You don't necessarily need a gut cleanse product that is full of binders like bentonite clay or dichotomous earth, sometimes it's called. These things are not necessary to help you feel better. The third area I want to talk about, which is absolutely not going away anywhere in 2026, is using AI as your nutritionist. Now, what I mean by this is people typing into ChatGPT or Google Gemini or like whatever you use, giving it your symptoms, and then getting a nutrition prescription back. And normally these are very much focused on taking supplements rather than dietary changes. This can be a really cost-effective way of accessing some information, and I again, can totally see why you find this helpful and why you might be using AI to plug the gap, especially if you cannot afford to work with somebody one-to-one. So I understand where it's coming from. My worry with it is that these language models that are generating information, they're not trained qualified nutritionists, right? Firstly, they are just large language models. So they don't necessarily have the right instructions on, what's a good amount of supplements to take, or what negative consequences may be, or even taking into account things like your relationship with food that cannot be judged by a machine in a good way. So there's that. But then also the information that is feeding these large language models like ChatGPT is what's on the internet. And we've got a couple of recent studies which have shown that 2% of nutrition information online is accurate. Now, there was one study that was done, I think maybe in 2023, so a couple of years ago, that didn't even include TikTok, but it was talking about websites, blog posts, and then a small amounts of social media. And they found that only 2% of information was accurate and correct about nutrition and about diets. There was another study done last year, which was looking specifically at TikTok and social media. And what it found is that around 30% of Gen Z are getting most of their news from TikTok, from scrolling, seeing what's happening, what's going on. But again, 2.1% of the nutrition information on TikTok was accurate and correct and comprehensive. In order to rank on social media platforms, you need to talk about more and more controversial things, and you need to get in on the trends, okay? So some of the trends I've talked about, like fiber maxing. Another one was the internal shower. So this is a TikTok trend where people drank chia seeds soaked in water with a bit of lemon. And the purpose of that was to try and force a bowel movement, to try and help people who had constipation. And again, it was coming from this method, from this position of cleaning you from the inside out. So I think we need to be a bit careful about clean eating and dirty foods, because you know what? Foods aren't dirty. They are, if they've been passed for human consumption, safe to eat. That's another whole topic. But the trends that come on, people need to jump on the trends, and it makes them more and more popular, because then you rank higher as a creator if you are jumping onto the nutrition trends, onto hashtags that are trending. So that's one thing. The other thing is standard nutrition advice is not very sexy. It's not very controversial. It is things like eat your 5 fruit and vegetables a day. Try and aim for 30 grams of fiber a day. Hit your protein targets. These are so boring and basic, and we have heard them a number of times. Cut down on your alcohol. Don't eat too much saturated fats. Like, everybody knows these, and more often than not, it's not a nutrition information problem that people are struggling with. It's about how do you put it into practice for your own body. So giving out more and more like radical information to try and rank and hit the TikTok algorithms forces people to create content which is sometimes a little bit off the wall and not necessarily backed in science. Now, some of it, like that internal shower, which was drinking the chia seeds, well, there might not really be any harm in that. Maybe some people do find it beneficial. It's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you're drinking water with it and you are making sure you're well hydrated. I think there were a few cases where people have had dry chia seeds and no liquid, and then have caused blockages in their esophagus or in their stomach because it's kind of gone into a little hard ball. So that's definitely not recommended. But I don't think that's part of the internal shower trend anyway. But what I guess I meant is, because the internet is often full of misinformation about nutrition, and then AI is basically taking all of that and scooping it together and providing you with your recommendations. The only way that AI knows what to say is by reading other stuff that's on the internet. And if a lot of the blog posts are inaccurate, sensationalizing nutrition information, and maybe even wrong and false and going against the generic guidelines, then some of that gets served back to you. And this is a problem not only with asking ChatGPT to come up with some supplements for you for IBS, but it's also in that Google summary, that AI summary. When you've done a search result, it will, sometimes people are not now clicking on the blog post below or the information to find out the facts behind it. They're just looking at the summary. And again, I found a number of times when they are summarizing things or not even calling them into question. As an example of this would be if you search around the Candida diet, you look up what's the best thing to eat on a Candida diet. And sometimes what comes back is it doesn't even question the validity of going on a diet in order to control a Candida overgrowth, which, by the way, doesn't really work. So these are the kind of things which you don't get when you're trusting your health with an AI model. In order to get around it, what I would suggest is, if you can, work with somebody who you trust, who knows a lot about information and knows a lot about your particular health characteristics or conditions that you want to work on. So if you want to work on weight loss, go to somebody who specializes in weight loss. If you have got skin conditions, go to somebody who specializes in eczema and psoriasis. If you want to work with somebody who knows IBS and SIBO, come to me. I work with people all over the world, and I'd be happy to have a conversation about what your needs are and what you want to get out of it. And then we'll see whether it's a good fit. But if you can't do that, because I know money is a big problem and it's a blocker for some people to find a nutritionist. So what you can think about is, what qualifications does this person have? Have they got any proper nutrition training, and how long have they been in business? Then you also might want to look at how sensational their language is. Are they talking about toxins, things being nasty, no chemicals, which is another big one, which I just really makes me mad because everything's chemicals. So that is one thing. Are they making you feel like there's only one way to eat? For example, being gluten-free, going on the carnivore diet, low carb. Is this the answer to all of your problems? Every blog post comes back to the same solutions. Watch out for that. Watch out for people who are selling supplements off their website as well. If they're a nutritionist and they're selling supplements, then most likely they have a vested interest in promoting what they are selling to you, and maybe taking what they're selling with a pinch of salt, because they've written blog posts in order to sell products. They're not doing it just to give you an unbiased opinion. Those would be my areas to watch out for in terms of who to trust and what to look for. If you are using AI to give you health information, then you can also try and give it those parameters. For example, say things like, only give me information that has been verified from scientific studies. Provide me with your sources is something else that you can ask AI to do. And then go and investigate those sources, because I've done this before in the past, and I've asked it to give me the evidence for what it's suggesting, and then it has totally flipped and changed its mind. So we can't always trust it. They call it an AI hallucination. Don't let the AI hallucination affect your health. If there are any trends or things going viral on social media that you want me to check out, please send me an email. My email is in the show notes, and I'd love to hear from you if you've got something that you need me to investigate or explain, whether it's true or whether it's not true. I hope those 3 little trends are something that you will look out for and be aware of as we move into a new year of nutrition information. I want to finish as well by saying I am releasing a book in January, and I'm really excited about it. It's taken a long time to write it and to get it out there. I will share a bit more about that in January when it's out, but I hope that will be a source for you to be able to use some of the information to put into practice in your own life. So it will be available to download wherever you are in the world, and also you can get hard copies via Amazon. If you have enjoyed my podcasts this year, if you've got anything out of them, please will you go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening now and rank and rate the podcast and give me a little review and say what you have got out of it. It really does help. People appreciate word of mouth, recommendations from other people who are in the same situation as you. So if you have got 2 minutes now, please go and do that for me. And on that note, I'll leave it there for this week. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Inside Knowledge podcast. Better digestion for everyone.